Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Galecki, and welcome to the 419th Imagine Buffalo program and another great virtual Imagine lecture hosted by the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Thank you so much for joining us today for the first of a 10-part series. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, or CSUN, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Now, we're going to start with our speakers shortly, but first a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted during our speakers presentation, which will last about 15 minutes. We'll have time for questions at the end. So if you do have a question, please type it into the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. This program is being recorded. You'll be able to watch it again later on the library's Facebook and YouTube channels. And we ask you to share the link with your friends and networks. As a reminder, Life Willing will be here on Zoom every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. with a great lineup of local speakers. Now, since beginning the Imagine series in 2009, we have had two themes. The first is to imagine Greater Buffalo as a premier North American cultural and nature center. And the second is to imagine a healthy, wealthy, and sustainable community. For both themes, you have to imagine place-based lifelong learning. Now, today's program is the first of a 10-part weekly series called Imagine Creating a Culture of Sustainability. Imagine place-based lifelong learning. Our speakers for the series are from the public and private sectors, as well as nonprofits and education through their fields of expertise. They will help us imagine what a sustainable community culture might look like. I am pleased to have John Hartman assist me with the Q&A portion of this program. JD is a member of Western New York Sustainable Business Roundtable. Now, to begin the series, we will hear from one of the founding members of Western New York Sustainable Business Roundtable, Ryan McPherson. Ryan has been UB's inaugural Chief Sustainability Officer since 2011. Brian McPherson has created a culture of innovative and collaborative sustainability at UB and implemented strategies to help position the university as a sustainability leader in the community, state, and nation. Among his chief priorities has been setting 10 key strategies to implement within the next decade as part of the university's climate action plan. He also has worked to integrate the sustainable development goals across campus and New York as part of the broader work to create the next generation of change agents. Under McPherson's leadership, UB has already achieved one of its sustainability goals. That is 100% of the electricity the university uses comes from clean, renewable sources, an achievement that has helped UB reduce its carbon footprint by 35% and put the university on the path to achieve climate neutrality by 2030. During McPherson's tenure, UB has received the Green Power Leadership Award from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, won the New York State Department of Environmental Excellence Award, and most recently in April of 2021, was rated #1 in the world among 566 colleges and universities by the Times Higher Education Impact Assessment among universities in taking urgent action to combat climate change. It's a real privilege to welcome Ryan McPherson. Ryan, take it away.
Well, thanks so much, Dennis. That sounds like my mother wrote that introduction, so I appreciate that. She'll be very happy that you volunteered to read that. Well, thank you. And, when Dennis reached out, it's such a great partnership between the libraries and Dennis and JD and Roundtable and the university and so many others who are engaged in this work. I'd like to talk a little bit today about what we think here, at least at the university, is the biggest threat that we face as a community, a world, a state, but not only a threat, but also an immense opportunity for us to evolve and really, I think, move into the potential that we have as humans. So what I'd like to do for about 15, 20 minutes here is kind of go into three different areas: the why, the what, and the how. And the why to us is really important here at UB. My boss, Laura Hubbard, I think constantly pushes us to go back to this. And for many years, the environmental community, and I've been part of that, we've led on climate because it's the right thing to do. And I think that's really important, and it's a moral underpinning. But there are a lot of reasons of why acting on climate is in our best interest. And here are 5 of them that I'd like to kind of take a dive into to really kind of put an explanation point under that it is in our best interest to move in this, and not just that moral imperative, that last one. For us here at the university, science is everything. And this is, if it's working correctly, this is just a short clip of our students and Professor Jason Briner up in Greenland right now, walking on top of a glacier, a melting glacier, as you can see. And what they do, and what his research and many others here at the university, so climate scientists or climate paleontologists will go down to the bottom of that glacier, pull up basically ice cores, and then in the upper picture that you're looking at here at the top of the screen, it's essentially a history, right, of the Earth's atmosphere. And in this case, the dissolved CO2 and other greenhouse gases that make up those harmful pieces that we're working to mitigate at this point. So if you look at these pieces, you can then decipher what the dissolved CO2 parts per million has been in our system. And as you see this rhythm over time that corresponds to the ice ages in our geological history. And then you see this box over at the end. And that is where we are right now. And that is the challenge that we're talking about. And that is the definitive challenge that science has underlined and come to a very clear consensus on. Looking a little bit more short term, when you look at the Industrial Revolution and how that corresponds to that CO2 concentration, you can see the same story except elevated. And what this has done, of course, is as you go over time, and I'm just using the last 30, 40 years here from 1984 to 2017, you can start to see how this is played out in scientific terms, in terms of the poles. Obviously, the darker red the color, the more of a temperature increase. Or you can look at this from last week's New York Times, just looking at the West and what has happened since 2000 to 2021. And the corresponding, not weather, but projected, actual heat that has occurred in terms of temperature increase. Or actually today, right now out in the Pacific Northwest, you can see the last 3 days are highlighted in these red dots. The rest of the dots are what Seattle's normal temperature has been. And so the science on all of this is really clear, and it's clear for Buffalo as well. If you look at the lower axis, we're talking about the Buffalo mean annual temperature from 1900 to 1929, so really between 43 and 50, if you will. And then when you adjust that for really from 1990 to 2018, you can see the shift that has occurred. So again, from 1900 to 1929, shifting over to 90 to 2020. And so what we see is not only an increase in 90-degree days here in Buffalo, but the projected increase to skyrocket. And especially when you look, we've never had a 100-degree day here in Buffalo, in the city proper, but you can see what is now projected under different scenarios. So the science has coalesced around this, and it's told us one simple thing that the global community agreed on in Copenhagen several years back in 2008. Which is We know that we can only let the Earth's temperature increase by 1.5 degrees Celsius if we want to stay within this kind of roughly comfortable, predictable world that has been built with us through the Holocene. Even in that 1.5 degrees, we're talking about things like last year where we had 5 hurricanes or tropical depressions, the first time ever in the Atlantic, or continued out of control wildfires out west, or the year before, or 2 years before, wiping out entire communities. And of course, not only here in America, but in Australia and other regions. And so that second number is, if we are to keep it under 1.5 degrees, we only can burn 565 gigatons of carbon. Don't worry about what a gigaton is. The importance is that that's our allowance. And the problem is that we're currently looking at burning 5 times that amount of fuel right now. So that's the conundrum, and that's where really science has left us, which is it's telling us that, to use a military term, we're living in volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times. And so the science has been very clear on this, and I'm sure most people watching this understand that. We at the Academy take that piece very seriously, and that's a huge point when I'm making arguments to senior leadership here, because it's a tenet of how we move and how we make decisions. But it's not the only one. We are a large organization, a $1.6 billion enterprise, and we also need to pencil things out. And the business case has also shifted quite a bit over the last decade, and the last 5 years, really. And what we see is our customers, if you will, students, are really valuing climate action, and they're valuing it across the board. When I can talk to my colleagues and tell them that 67% of Gen Z students think that sustainability is an important factor with where deciding to go to school, that is a very different conversation than saying acting on climate is the right thing to do. It's a very core tenet of thinking about the type of students that we want to recruit to our university, and that will be the change makers that we're looking for. So that's a really important piece, and it's important to reflect that in rankings, as Dennis had mentioned, because we use those then to go out and recruit great faculty and staff and students for our work. It's also something where, the fear of missing out is a very real thing for us. And so my colleagues, while we collaborate tons in higher ed, whether it's Albany or Stanford or, across the board, we are competing for those customers. So if the University of Albany does something where they are decreasing emissions, I've got to keep pace with that. And these are real things that we see in corporate America as well as higher education. And speaking of corporate America, all of the leading companies right now, not just the ones I'm showing here, are acting on climate and dropping emissions. The ones here are already at 100% renewables and moving towards carbon neutrality as a whole. They're joined by a lot of other competitors. And you see something JD knows very well about. You see the financial sector completely pivoting right now. And I would say the last 2 years specifically, I think people thought with COVID that we would see a slowdown of this. We've actually seen a massive acceleration, as exemplified most recently by engine number one, a fantastic story about JD. I don't know if they were a hedge fund or what financial vehicle they were, but had an ownership in ExxonMobil of like 0.01%, if that, and managed just to have I think it's 3 now board seats at Exxon, because of not because it's the right thing to do, but because the arguments that they were making that ExxonMobil is not diversifying its future, and it is stuck in a fossil fuel paradigm and not looking at renewables as part of its portfolio. And you see this as well with Shell. The Netherlands court, the Dutch court, excuse me, just sent down a pretty groundbreaking ruling looking for them to reduce emissions. And then the International Energy Association, not necessarily a carbon fighting entity, just about 3 weeks ago, pushed out that we need to stop digging up fossil fuel if we want to have a stable world. So these are mainstream, if not, I guess maybe to the other extreme entities that are all now sending this message. So we've got the business case, we've got the science, but it's also because we have to. We have new laws in effect, and the state of New York is really leading on this with the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act. Excuse me, the climate neutrality by 2050, and the CLCPA has really been instrumental in that in New York, and a lot of other statutes that you can see, that kind of a green New York deal, if you will. And then, of course, the Biden administration has put this at the center. So regulation is here and coming. You know, we've got economies and business cases lining up, and the science is lining up. And oh yeah, it is still the right thing to do. And I belabor this why, because I think it is really important for us to understand these components, because when you're talking to people about climate, and if you're just elevating one's voice and repeating your same talking points without thinking about what's going to resonate with a specific audience, you know, I think we're missing an opportunity. So we spend a lot of time doing that as the foundation of our climate action strategy, and really understanding our audience and thinking about how we move to them. The what is actually pretty simple in some sense, right? So this is the University of Buffalo's carbon footprint. And what you'll see here is a lot of it is keeping us warm. That's the natural gas, the 38% you see there. So when we, in the middle of the winter, when we're burning natural gas to stay warm, that's emitting obviously fossil fuel and CO2 use and methane. But it's also a lot of commuting. And you can see here, we've got it broken down by faculty, student, and staff, as well as a bunch of other sectors. One of the key ones that's missing here is electricity, and that's because we've moved all of our electricity to renewable sources here at the university. And so that's really, when you see over to the right-hand side, that decrease, that main drop has been, that 32% drop has been a move to renewable energy from fossil fuel-based ones. So that really kind of frames up our strategy, if you will, of the how. How are we trying to do this, and what does climate action really look like when you cut through the kind of talking points and whatnot? Well, first off, climate action means for us getting to zero, and we've made that commitment. So net carbon neutrality, that means getting at least to 85%, and the last 15% you can use different types of offsets, but not more than that. And by the way, those offsets need to be created within 25 miles of where the emission occurs. So this is not, you know, do something with the Amazon rainforest, which is all great, but do something here in Buffalo. So it's getting to zero. And if there's any visual, I guess, that I'd ask you to take away, it would be this one. There are 10 strategies that the university is advancing within the next 10 years, the time that our scientists tell us that we must reach neutrality. And they really span the kind of radar. And I'm just going to walk through them just to give you a very high level understanding of what it is we're doing. These 10 also each have a captain, as in climate action plan, captain, leader, and then a series of probably about 10 other members from across the university on each of these working groups. So that first working group, putting a price on pollution, is led by our fantastic university controller, Beth Corey, here at the university. And really, we spent the last year, we launched this about a year ago, having a lot of conversations with the DEC, our peers out there, and thinking about how we put an internal price of carbon here at the university. And a bunch of our peers have started to do this, as well as companies like Microsoft and others. One that I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into here is our second one, which is not all electricity is created equal. And the idea on this is that we have a large coalition that we're leading with the county, Buffalo State College, ECC, et cetera. And we're doing both an internal solar at all these institutions and external. And our piece, this is one of the many projects here at the university that is currently under construction. You can see that's Alumni Arena, that's the Ellicott Complex. Let's see if I can get the technology to work here. This is about a 50-second clip if I can get it to go. Let's see if it'll work. Come on. It'll probably give us a commercial as well, most likely. Let's see. So that was that was filmed about 3 or 4 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we've got about 50% of the panel, 60% of the panels on this array right now alone. So we're getting very close on these. And I'll just close out by mentioning some of the other pieces of this climate strategy, which is electrifying our fleet. We're making slow but steady progress on this, and essentially every new vehicle that we buy to replace our fleet will be electric. The state of New York has just passed legislation. The governor is ready to sign this, that by 2030, all new vehicles sold in the state of New York will be electric. Our heating and cooling strategy of transitioning, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, transitioning to non-fossil fuels and electrifying our heat is another huge area. We're launching our first pilot battery program here with the partnership with NYPA and the university. A lot of people don't think about necessarily materials and reuse and recycling as a climate issue, but 40% of all emissions in this country come from either the production of or use of materials. And so that's a huge important part for us. Conservation, of course, is always the first step. And then our commuting. We talked a lot about the emissions that are coming from folks who commute into the university, and we are responsible for those. So providing both mass transit, low carbon fuels, active mobility, and of course, new EV charging infrastructure. We just added, I think it's 7 times the amount of chargers that we have on campus that went online in February. And then finally, we're starting to tackle our food. We have not been great at being able to count carbon in our food consumption. It's a huge piece. It's 25% of everyone's individually their own carbon budget for the most part. And here at the university is probably a little bit bigger. And then in addition, we're also creating a localized offset program and really measuring and engaging our faculty and staff in this work. So I want to pause there to make sure that we have plenty of time for discussion and questions as well. And really excited to have a chat with JD here.
Well, I'm going to invite our audience to submit questions, but JD, if you could kick us off and ask Ryan anything on your mind.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciated all that great information, Ryan. I really admire the work you and your colleagues and the university is doing, not only on the university, but throughout the community. And I think I want to ask maybe 2 questions. One is, I liked one of your 10 initiatives out there is not all electricity is created equal. And equality, I'm going to take a step back. You mentioned that really the issue of our age is climate action, is the warming of the Earth's surface temperature and all the resulting impact. And I agree with that, but what I also know over that one chart that you showed of the CO2 emissions growing precipitously in the recent past, you could overlay the inequality of income and wealth. And so sometimes I do worry, not sometimes, I worry every day, it's part of my work, is that we may solve, we may be moving toward a solution to, let's just call it climate change, but that the net result will be further inequalities of income and wealth and other measures. what income, wealth, inequalities, but also child labor and mining rare earths that go into solar panels and my electric car and that type of thing. So what's your feeling on that? I know it's not local, but it is local in that, hey, we live in a city that's very, the income disparity and wealth disparities are way above national averages. So anyway, I'm going to be quiet and just get your thoughts.
No, I think it's a great question, and one that I am sure I won't do the justice that it deserves. I will say this, we have failed, and we cannot fail going forward. It would be, I think, colossal missed opportunity. Bob Shibley introduced me to Dwight Eisenhower's great quote about, when you can't solve a problem, what do? You make it bigger. And I think there's some wise strategy in that. And I think what you've started to see in the overarching climate movement is, I think, a openness and a demanding that we make sure that this is also bringing in all the voices it needs to, and that it is, I think, putting us in a place where we are providing a solution that works for all communities and not just some. The piece that I think is the saddest when it comes to the current challenge is that those who have done the least to create the current challenge will suffer the most. And I hate saying that, but it is already true. And we need to rectify that. That is not just, that is not fair, and that is not, I think, who we are as humans. And so when we think about the solutions that we put out there, it's not just getting to zero, right? It's figuring out ways where we don't leave Bangladesh underwater, and we don't leave the East Side without opportunity and jobs, and figuring out how to be part of the solution, and most importantly, listening to what their needs are, not what we think is a good solution for folks, right? We've done that for way too long. I think it's very complicated. I think it's very messy. It was messy without trying to think about equity in it, and we must have it, but I don't see how you get to climate action without climate justice, and that is an imperative piece. I don't have all the answers to how we do that, but I think listening is part of it. I think the rub on this is that, if I just listen to our scientists here at UB, there is a ticking clock, and this is not something that we can just kind of kick down the road. And so we need to drop emissions. Every day where we don't drop emissions is a harder and more costly day, and more people will die as a result. However, we need to balance that with making sure that we've got everyone together, and that we're not just finding solutions for a few or those who can afford it, right? So that's my attempt at that, JD.
Yeah. Thank you. And it is the unanswerable question, so I apologize for throwing that out. But it is in the investment world, it's ESG, it's the environment, social justice, and governance, that component. So yeah, it is a balancing act. But I agree with you. We have no time to waste on the environmental aspect.
And just as a follow-up to that, JD, the theme, as I stated at the beginning, is literally for us to try to imagine a healthy, wealthy, and sustainable community. And I think if we do the sustainability piece, we'll also, because of the linkage you point out, touch on the health and the sense of wealth, and how we define it. And are we comfortable with the way it's happening here in our community? Obviously, much discussion. If it's an existential threat, as many of us believe it is, then we'll hopefully get to work on it in a very unified fashion. And that's really the intent of this lecture series over 10 weeks. Leah, any other questions that we have from the audience?
We do not have any questions.
This conversation is an appropriate one. We did have some problems getting the right links out. So we have a more limited audience than I think we might have had, and those will be corrected certainly for next week. This is archived. Let's just chat for just a couple more minutes and take advantage of this, maybe prompt a question or two. JD, any other dimensions to go connect if you would, because I introduced Ryan as part of the founder of Western New York Sustainable Business Roundtable. And in fact, you just had a summit in May. I was privileged to attend it for 2 days, and locally a Zoom conference. I was amazed at the collaboration that exists at the private sector and the public sector to agree that between the speakers and looking at sustainable development goals. That was the theme. Could you both comment on where you see that organization and the leadership role it can be taking in the community?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the roundtable, so I think we've got 4 or 5 different kind of areas or groupings, if you will, in terms of where I see a lot of progress in terms of implementing sustainability here in Western New York. So, you know, the number of NGOs, some of which are speaking later in this series, in Western New York who are advancing this within that sector, I think is phenomenal. I think you've got from a municipality and governance, the One Region Forward initiative, which is essentially a sustainable development plan for the region, and really has voices of governance and government at the table. And then of course the roundtable, which has, you know, I think has done a really phenomenal job of providing an environment for business to come together and really advance sustainability within a place-based context, Dennis, as you opened us up with. There are a lot of different sustainability associations by sector, organizations out there. We have several for higher ed, whatever sector you're in, whether it's beverages or manufacturing or whatever, but having something that is place-based and really trying to advance the goals of sustainable development here in Buffalo, Niagara has been really important. If you haven't had a chance to engage with that group, it's Western New York it's this I'll get the URL in a second. I'm having a brain cramp on it, but just type in Western New York Sustainable Business Roundtable, and you'll get some good information on that. JD, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Well, hey, my both experience as a member, but also kind of as an observer, is that the SBR, Sustainable Business Roundtable, has been really successful. Just quick anecdotal story. One of the key members, one of the largest employers in Western New York, has a board member on the SBR. I was down at their facility to meet with the CEO of that company, and I have to, honestly, I was going in thinking that the gentleman was, all profit and only profit. And the fact of the matter was, the CEO of this very large company was very well informed and passionate and taking action on instituting sustainable business practices, right from reducing their carbon footprint to some social equity in their supply chain and so on and so forth. It was really heartening. And that company is a member of the SBR. They have a key employee representative of their company on the board. So the SBR is is part of the solution.
Yeah, and I would just add one last quick piece that, this kind of visual that I just threw up here is a great aspect of kind of part of what the roundtable is trying to focus on, what we're doing here at UV when we're thinking about how we're making decisions. That classic kind of triple bottom line, but to JD, to your question too, right? The people piece of this always has to come first, and then we have to think about stewardship, of course, of our resources. And yeah, we live in the real world where we have to pencil things out, whether that's profit maybe for companies or prosperity here for UV and penciling things. But at the end of the day, it's also anchoring to this larger true north of purpose, right? What is our purpose? I hope, my own gut is I hope it's not just to make money, but to make something better. And I see that in the companies that we work with in the roundtable, who are all looking to that larger larger kind of purpose to move us forward.
Brian, JD, thanks. Leah, did we get a question that we could quickly get in just in our closing moments?
Yes. Does the university have, or is it working to build partnerships with farmers, both for food production as well as advancing techniques such as no-till?
Such a great question. So my colleague Derek Nichols actually does a lot of work in this space, and we have amazing faculty who, people like Dr. Samina Raja, who are out there throughout the globe, kind of, one of our food planning rock stars, if you will, in the country. So we have, I would say, in our areas of research and our areas of teaching, doing a lot in this space. We're not an ag school, so we unlike Cornell, who is the land grant for the state on that, we don't do tons in that space. On our own operations, though, we work with Campus Dining and Shops, who does our food services here at the university. And so we've been trying to do a few things in this area. We have a lot of partnerships with local farmers. We've actually even reached out to farmers working, or CDS has, looking at ways in which we could help them expand, because the capacity that we need when we go out to these farmers, if you can think about 30,000, 40,000 people when all the faculty and staff are on this campus, we need a certain supply chain on that. But we're always open to trying to form new relationships. I push our food team here because the more localized we can get our food source, the more independent, the better rankings that we do, things of that nature. And the last piece I'd say on this is when it comes to climate, the food piece is really, really important. Everyone thinks that local is much, much better in terms of climate, but at the end of the day, the huge game changer on this is eating lower on the food chain, of course. And so red meats and other things like that really have an exponential, and this coming from I am not a vegan or a vegetarian. I try my best and fail forward every day, but as low as you can eat on that food chain. And so we're trying to shift some of the menus at the university as well to reflect that, et cetera. So yeah, we're working on that, and we're open to new relationships and certainly more sustainable farming practices within the scale that we operate. Thank you for that question.
Brian, can I just build on that real quickly? Do you feel that that you've reached a point where you aren't just a part of the university, but that your thought process of sustainability is infusing the whole system, including graduates to staff to future attendees to the whole community? Do you really feel that you've been able to begin that infusion process?
Yeah, I think we're beginning, right? We have a long way to go, but when senior leadership makes decisions here, they're looking through that quadruple bottom line. They are, factoring in those pieces and really trying to think long term. We have the liberty. We know we're going to be here, right? We are not going to be the University of Orchard Park or the University of, Batavia, right? We are part of this community and have been for a very long time. And I think, making smart long-term decisions like the Haudenosaunee taught us to do through the great law of the Iroquois Confederacy, it is in our best interest. And I think we're starting to get to a place where all of us are being forced a little bit more to do that, because the consequences of not doing that are getting crisper and crisper, and quite frankly, just incredibly unattractive, right? And we don't want to go down that road. And we're also starting to see, I guess I'd end on this piece, the piece that keeps me incredibly hopeful, is the students that I get to see every day here, who are tomorrow's change makers. They are focused on this issue. They are focused on racial equity, and they are really trying to advance solutions in this space. And I have a lot of confidence that they're doing that. And I think it's our job here at the university to provide an example of how we can try to do that, but also to provide them as much empowerment as possible.
You know, and it's our job to pick up on your hopeful conclusion, to see the world that will be because of our efforts, and it's our challenge at this time. It was others before us, and it'll be others after us, but right now it's our challenge. And Ryan, you're doing a great job to give us the leadership to here in the community and to kick off the series. So we're going to thank everybody for attending. We will make sure that the right links get out and make this easier. But we will say thanks for today and welcome you back next week. We're going to have Kevin Connors. One of the teaching vehicles I see happening is the new Buffalo Heritage Carousel at Canalside. Why? It's solar powered through the generosity of Tesla. And we're going to hear Kevin is the lead architect for having designed that facility. And we're going to see how we can turn that into a lifelong learning center while kids and parents and grandparents are having a good time at a beautiful carousel. If you haven't seen it, make it a point to do so. So that's next week, same time, 12:30. And we'll figure out the right Zoom to send, and hope to see you then. Please tell others about this. This will be archived, and you'll be able to share that link with your friends. So folks, thank you very much. I'm Dennis Galecki. Have a good afternoon and be well.